everybody in Canada is driving a Honda Civic right now with respect to healthcare, right? It's like it gets you from point A to point B. It's not the most beautiful or fast car. It doesn't have all of the features you might want and things. But in the US, you have some people that are driving Lamborghinis and some people that might have a skateboard or they might be walking.
Paging Dr. Cook. Paging Dr. Cook. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR.
Welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast with your host, Dr. Randy Cook.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Prescription for Success. I'm Dr. Randy Cook, your host for the podcast, which is a production of MD Coaches, providing leadership and executive coaching for physicians by physicians to overcome burnout, transition your career, develop as a leader, or whatever your goal might be. Visit MD Coaches on the web at mymdcoaches.com. because you're not in this alone. My guest today is an internist and geriatrician who practices in his native Canada. In addition to his clinical responsibilities, he is the co-creator of the ARIA electronic healthcare record, as well as an online educational program called iGeriCare for caregivers and patients dealing with dementia. I'm glad you could join us today, so let's hear my conversation with Dr. Richard Sztramko. Well, this is a really momentous occasion for Prescription for Success. This is our first international guest, Dr. Richard Sztramko from Hamilton, Ontario, in Canada, is our guest today. Rich, it is such a pleasure to have you here, and welcome to Prescription for Success.
Randy, thanks so much for having me. It's absolutely my pleasure.
Well, I'm really looking forward to the conversation, hoping maybe we might get a little bit of your insight into how medical care is different between your country and mine. I know you spent some time in the U.S. during part of your training, so you've had a really good opportunity to see it from both sides, and hopefully we'll get into some of that territory. But Rich, as is always the case, we like to begin at the beginnings, and I'm interested to know when you thought you might have an interest in going into medicine and when you thought that might be your life's work.
Yeah, it was actually quite clear for me. I became sick when I was 15 years old, and so I had Crohn's disease and became quite sick with a bowel perforation secondary to complications from surgery.
Wow.
So I spent about 6 weeks in hospital. I had multiple operations. I was in the ICU. I was ventilated, which is kind of an interesting experience to have as a physician, like having those memories and understanding what it feels like to kind of be woken up and having a breathing tube in.
I think you're the first physician that I've ever spoken to that has had that experience. That's fascinating.
It was, obviously it was scary and terrifying, but fascinating at the same time in retrospect. And so it was an interesting time. I was a very healthy, fit, athletic guy going into it, which probably put me in good stead. And then, 6 weeks later, I walked out of the hospital. I'd lost like 50 or 60 pounds. I was being NG fed.
My goodness.
So you can imagine what it's like as a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old. Going from being like, the captain of your hockey team to, of course, hockey in Canada, right?
Sure.
But I was, playing football and stuff to being very limited and barely being able to walk up the stairs and being extremely, emaciated and all of that stuff. But while I was in hospital, I met this surgeon. His name's Mark Walton. He's actually one of the deans here at McMaster University Medical School now. And he was just so kind and caring, and he would crack jokes, and he'd be quite funny with the residents that were following him around as well. And I just remember feeling so at ease when I was in his presence, and just him showing that tiny bit of kindness every day made such a big difference in my life when I was going through this very challenging time. And so that when it really hit me, I was like, I want to have that kind of impact on people's lives. I want to be the person that can make a large difference with kind of the small changes in how you deal with people and how you command medical knowledge.
I think that's the first time in my life that I've heard anyone talk about a surgeon in those terms. And this makes me very happy, being a retired surgeon myself. I want to dig into that a little bit more later on in your medical career. Did you find surgeons to be much like the one that you met when you were sick, or were they more like the sort of cool and detached individuals that we see on the television shows and hear about in the doctor's lounge and places like that?
I mean, it was a mixture of both. So the second touch point that I had was actually, so I'm from a smaller town. It's called Simcoe. It's about 15,000 people. And I did an observership with one of the general surgeons in my hometown. So, I thought I wanted to be a general surgeon. And he was just an incredible guy. His name is Nabi Matter. And he's from Lebanon originally and trained in Ireland and spent some time in Africa. But he was kind of the true general surgeon in that in a small town, in that if you fractured your hip, he'd put a pin in place. If you needed carpal
Sure.
tunnel done, he would do that. He would do upper and lower endoscopies. He would do bronchoscopies, all the urologic procedures as well as the GI procedures. So he
Yeah.
was an incredibly direct man, but also very kind and compassionate, and he got a lot done. Right, he kind of carried much of the surgical service in for the whole town on his shoulders. So he was a little bit different, much more direct, but also carried a lot of respect around town, obviously, for what he did, and could certainly be kind and compassionate. And actually, strangely enough, he operated on my mother at a later point. She required surgery, and so he did that for her. So it was kind of like kind surgeon to kind surgeon, and then more through training, you realize that I've had some experiences with more of the prototypic surgeons, but I've met everyone in between as well. And I think that's it. It's like there are stereotypes, and some of them definitely play out to be true
Yeah.
amongst medical specialties. But when you treat everybody as individuals, you'll definitely
Yeah.
find some gems, some amazing human beings that are surgeons that are extremely kind and caring and compassionate. So I've seen kind of everything in between, but definitely I've had more experience with the non-stereotyped surgical personality for sure.
I guess it's fair to say then that you patterned your pre-medical education with exactly that in mind. I mean, at the time that you began working on your college degree, you pretty well knew where you were headed. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to this program called the Bachelor of Health Sciences, and it was a fairly competitive program to get into. So everybody really wanted to get into medical school. So it's kind of focused, highly competitive group of people that all were really focused on getting into medical school, which was kind of helpful because you just kind of went along with the flow. Everybody helped each other out a lot. Everybody would study together, and then there were some really interesting courses that we would take. The dean of that program was a little bit of an innovator as well, and so we had a bunch of different interesting classes that we would take.
So I'm guessing you had no difficulty getting accepted to University of Toronto for medical school. And tell me what it was like once that was underway. Was it more or less what you expected? Were there any unexpected challenges, or just what was your experience?
It was pretty much what I thought. It's a little bit different experience than McMaster, right? It's the big city in Canada. It's a much more kind of highly competitive environment, and
Mm-hmm.
so it was what I was looking for. I wanted to move into a larger city, and I wanted that kind of more preeminent academic institution experience, and so I definitely got that at the University of Toronto. I mean, it was more of a typical academic experience than the one that I'd had at McMaster
Sure.
previously.
A little more structured, I bet.
Absolutely, which is good too. right? And
Of
you
course,
realize that
sure.
there are definitely different ways to go about the educational process, and it's not a
Yeah.
one size fits all experience.
So at some point, it turned out that surgery was not going to be your career goal. And did you lean initially toward internal medicine, or were you interested in geriatrics fairly early on?
No, geriatrics came around a little bit later
Hmm.
in the game for me. So I had set up all of my surgical electives as I'd planned to do. And then the first step was just the internal medicine side of things. I just detail oriented fashion and just knowing a lot about kind of every organ system
Hmm.
fascinated me. And that's really what turned me over, as well as the lifestyle a little bit. Like with my health limitations, I thought that it probably is not the best idea to push myself too much.
Sure,
Like I need to kind of be a bit kinder to myself. So I think internal medicine was a good choice in that sense. And I loved the team approach, like being with the team all day on the wards, educating and teaching and kind of learning. I loved this social aspect of team medicine in
sure,
particular.
sure. Yeah, and the problem solving of being an internist, I just can't imagine anybody not enjoying that. And sounds like you did as well.
Absolutely.
When did the idea of geriatrics begin to take root in your plans?
Yeah, it was relatively late as well. It was the third year of my training, and I
Mm,
really loved ICU, right? I loved intensive care and I loved cardiology.
yeah,
But what I liked most about the ICU was just the top to bottom comprehensive approach, an organ
yeah,
system based approach. And
yeah,
to be honest, I found the same thing about geriatrics. Like you have a relatively comprehensive problem list. What drew me to general medicine was knowing a lot about a lot. And when I started looking at geriatrics, I was like, well, I can learn a lot more about neurology and understand neurodegenerative conditions and
hmm,
musculoskeletal medicine, but also psychiatry as well, right? We do a ton of psychiatry, and so I just felt like it was another experience to broaden my knowledge set. And then the other thing is that people are really thankful for the care that they get from their geriatric physicians, like
yeah,
very thankful and appreciative, because
hmm,
oftentimes it's not just the patient that's there that's suffering, it's their family and their caregivers alongside of them. And
yeah,
so I kind of feel like I never have one patient. I always have a group of patients. When they're in such a dire set of circumstances and you can provide insight or at least to let them know what's happening and then come up with plans around both their medical conditions as well as their social functioning and problems and their physical needs, it can be quite a powerful experience. So I leave my clinic refreshed every day,
yeah,
and I noted that as well when I was, as part of my training. I was like, there's lots of times that medicine can seem like you're kind of just cranking through patients, and
hmm,
uh, it can get a little bit repetitive sometimes if it's too algorithmic. And I felt that geriatrics really brought that kind of personal feel and personal touch into the everyday experience.
yeah. And I can see where the problem solving challenges probably help keep it from becoming repetitive because everybody's life is a little different, right? Everybody's family situation is a little different. So the solutions have to be more specifically tailored. Am I right about that or not?
No, you are absolutely right. So it does require some creativity, absolutely, especially when people, might not have a close family member, and so you're relying on friends and you're relying on community supports and things like that. And I think too, it's just making sure that every rock is overturned to look for things. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we get falls, and people will call them mechanical falls all the time, but I've diagnosed some interesting paraneoplastic encephalitis that were causing the falls, or ALS, or Guillain-Barré syndrome, or
Mm-hmm.
there's always things that people don't first think about that sometimes physicians might pass through, but when you are looking at things through the eye of a geriatrician, you can pick some interesting things up.
Remember medical school? You were confident, studious, hardworking, and you learned what to expect in all manner of patient care. Then reality struck. Regulations, expenses, staff management, and administration. Is this what we signed up for? stress on the verge of burnout, no time for family, or the reason we got into medicine. Helping people. What are the options when you're afraid you're in the wrong career? Transition, teach, quit? What if there was another way? MD Coaches can help. We're a team of medical professionals with a century of experience in the clinical and business sides of medicine. More importantly, MD Coaches has been where you are, stressed and trying to navigate a world school didn't prepare us for. MD Coaches is your mentor, your confidant, to help you make your practice shine, navigate administrations, and successfully lead staff and projects. Or if you're ready to transition, we can help there too. MD Coaches is doctors helping doctors. Visit our website to receive a free, no-obligation consultation. Go to mymdcoaches.com/RX. That's mymdcoaches.com/RX. Isn't it time someone else was on your side? Don't let the business of being a doctor stop you from doing what you love. That site again, mymdcoaches.com/RX. Visit us today.
We'll get back to our interview in just a moment, but right now I want to tell you a little bit about Physician Outlook. If you haven't discovered this remarkable magazine, please do so very soon. It was created by physicians for physicians to showcase the intersection between clinical and non-clinical interests, whether it's writing, painting, cooking, politics, and dozens of other topics. Physician Outlook gives a physician perspective. It's available online and in print. It's really unique among physician lifestyle magazines. And like the Prescription for Success podcast, Physician Outlook amplifies the voice of any physician who has something to say. It also engages patients who still believe in physician-led, team-based care. And Prescription for Success listeners can get 3 months free when you enter our promo code RX for Success and select the monthly option at checkout. That's a really great deal on this stunning publication. And now let's get back to today's interview. And so at some point, you made the decision to follow a path into what I think is one of the more neglected areas of medical practice, and that is cognitive disorders. And that took you into this country, University of California, San Francisco. You want to tell us about how you made that decision and what that experience was like?
Absolutely. So when I was a resident doing geriatrics, I did an elective down at the Memory and Aging Center at the University of California, San Francisco, and was exposed to Bruce Miller and Howie Rosen and the group down there. And the way they looked at the brain and they looked at cognitive problems was unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. And the advanced technologies that they were using, looking at rapidly progressive dementias with Michael Geschwin, I found it such an incredible environment to be in that I decided to go back and do a clinical fellowship when I'd completed my geriatric fellowship. Mm-hmm. So it was just a fascinating time. Obviously, living in the United States is a different experience. It was a ton of fun. And I think, what you do very well in the US is scaling things, right? Thinking about the biggest ideas and raising tons of money and leveraging academic institutions. And, to see the scale of their operation there was very impressive as it's applied to medicine. So it was a great experience.
That's very interesting, and I really wanted to really hear more about the differences that you experienced comparing healthcare delivery in Canada versus healthcare delivery in the U.S. I think the U.S. obviously has its problems, largely revolving around getting it paid for, but if you were going to talk about the advantages and the disadvantages of healthcare delivery in between the two nations, give us a summary of what you think is good and bad on both sides.
Well, I kind of think about it like this, and that everybody in Canada is driving a Honda Civic right now with respect to healthcare, right? It's like it gets you from point A to point B. It's not the most beautiful or fast car. It doesn't have all of the features you might want and things, but But in the US, you have some people that are driving Lamborghinis and some people that might have a skateboard or,
Or they
a
might be
bike,
walking.
or they might be walking. Exactly. So that's what I think. It's like you've got a good average delivery system in Canada, which is great. And I think it provides some societal benefit as well. It's like you feel good when you take care of everybody in your society. Like that's good. But there are also some advantages to being strong and free and proud and having more kind of libertarian principles where it's like you need to take care of yourself and provide that strength. And some of that more aggressive, strength based ideology in the US drives the innovation, which benefits us in Canada, right? So, like, the Canadians are a bit smug in that they think that, well, yes, we've got this universal healthcare system, we take care of everybody. But when you dig a little bit deeper, you're like, okay, Canada, that's great, but where do your drugs come from? Like, how many Canadian pharmaceutical companies are cranking out new drugs all the time? Or, we have Epic and Cerner or Meditech implemented in all of our hospitals. Like, where did you get that technology, and where do the IV poles come from, and where, you know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
where do all the medical device companies come from? Like, we don't have Canadian medical device companies. So it's like we're kind of piggybacking at the same time and using a lot of the technologies that are generated by this very, innovative scaling economy that's just to the south of us.
That's an interesting observation, and I'm really curious about why you think that is the case. Why is it that innovative companies don't have any interest in doing their innovation in Canada? Have you got any ideas on that?
Well, I'm not sure. Like, it's changing right now in Canada. So I don't know if we're catching up a little bit. Like, so in Toronto in particular, like, if you look at the pool of tech talent, it's San Francisco, New York, and then Toronto is number three, right? So it's not like
Mm-hmm.
we're
Mm-hmm.
like that's bigger than Chicago or that's bigger than Miami or that's bigger than Austin, right? Like,
Yeah.
we have a bigger pool of tech talent. And so things are changing quite rapidly with respect to innovation and the entrepreneurial spirit and growing and scaling companies. And it is starting to get applied to digital health as well. So I think things are moving in that direction, but they're not quite there yet. And I think previously, it's just the concentration of both capital and an ecosystem, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
to get a company up and running, you need a lot of help and support. You need the appropriate legal support and regulatory support and technological team, but you also need angel investors and venture capitalists and, other financing, grants and stuff like that. So I think before they were just more highly concentrated in the US, and Canada is starting to pick up on those things. So it is moving in the right direction, I think, but that's just some general observations about the difference. And the other thing I was going to say is most times incorrectly, people will refer to the Canadian system as socialized medicine or, completely government Canadian healthcare delivered, whereas
Mm-hmm.
it's really all the hospitals are private, not-for-profit institutions that are paid for by the government. So
Mm-hmm.
as a physician, I'm not a government employee, right? Like I'm
Sure.
just a contractor. So it's not like the NHS in the UK, let's say, where all the doctors and nurses and everybody is an employee of the actual health system, which is run by the government.
Well, I'm going to go out on a limb a little bit and suggest I don't know if you're holding back because of your modesty or just exactly what the motivation might be, but you're actually quite an innovator yourself. I don't quite know where to begin with the ideas that you have brought into the system, and we can start
Mhm.
wherever you like. Something that really caught my eye, and you may say that this is relatively simple, but I think it's a brilliant piece of work. Is the iGeri Care educational program? Uh,
Yeah.
Tell the audience about that. This thing is brilliant.
Well, I think part of the problem, like, I don't know if you've been a patient or you've had a loved one that's been a patient, but when you go to try and learn about something and you don't have up to date, right? You're not learning
Mm-hmm.
about it from a clinical perspective, or you
Right.
don't know how to do a lit review. Like, where do you go to find information? When you go to a lot of these websites, it's complicated because they give you everything you need to know, about every aspect of the disease all at one time. Whereas a lot of the education that patients and their caregivers need are problem focused. It's a specific problem, right?
Right.
And in particular, somebody who has no cognitive impairment or very mild cognitive impairment is so different and has such different educational needs than somebody that is in the end stage of their illness or
Hmm.
disease, or somebody
Hmm.
that's having significant psychosis or behavioral symptoms. So we wanted to provide something that's easy to digest, where people don't have to do a lot of reading that can be very hard and time consuming when especially when you're a caregiver spending like 40 or 60 hours a week.
And it reads like it was written by a clinician, right?
Well, and it's a clinician giving you those clinical pearls, and
Right.
it's narrative. So it's evidence based or evidence informed. They're customizable prescriptions or lessons that you can consume based on where you're at or what your needs are. So
What I found was that I try to put myself in the place of a patient. If you go in there, you can right away you can see the number of questions that might be asked, and you can go right to the question that you're interested in, and it really is brilliant. I was very impressed with it.
yeah, it definitely saves a lot of time for people and removes the guesswork or feeling overwhelmed as a caregiver, right? It's like information input overload is what we wanted to avoid. So we've scaled it out across Canada. We've had over 150,000 visitors to the site and launched over 50,000 lessons, I believe now, with most people completing them. So, and then if you compare the delivery, let's say a physician or an occupational therapist or a social worker provided you with that education, it might cost $50 to $70 for them to do that, whereas it
Yeah,
costs us about, a dollar or two to deliver that lesson for people via the site. So it's very cost efficient as well as saving time for the care providers and patients that use it. So we're really happy about it.
I gather the responsiveness has probably been pretty good. Are you getting a lot of visitors to the site?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in the hundreds of thousands. And definitely a shout out to Dr. Anthony Levinson, who's my partner in that or co-founder.
Yeah.
He's an e-learning kind of guru and has been doing this for 15, 20 years. The guy's a genius. And if you look at the site too, you'll see it's different, right? It's like the branding and the colors and fonts that are
Hmm.
used. It's very modern and easy to navigate, and the lessons use all of the evidence-based e-learning principles as well.
Yeah, it really is beautifully designed. So many of these things, if you give it a broad subject, you will see sort of a very nondescript list of possibilities. You really don't, and they're not really in an understandable language for the patient, I'm thinking. But this, to me, appears that it was patterned on the very questions that patients and their caregivers would ask. And I can only imagine that it really works beautifully for them. And it sounds like that's been your experience as well.
Yes, and that's been their experience. So we have, an academic program in the background as well that's evaluating the effectiveness of it and translating it into different languages. We just translated it into French and doing more scale
Really
and spread stuff. Yeah, so it's growing
terrific.
quite nicely.
Great. So, another area that I want to ask you about is a really hot item, certainly in the U.S., and that's the electronic healthcare record, the EHR. Up until the time that I retired from active practice, I had not seen any EHR that served either the physician or the patient very well. But you and your colleagues have put one together called ARIA. That's ARIA with a Y, ARYA. And I'd like to hear. I have no experience with this one. I'd like for you to tell our audience what makes ARIA different and why is it better.
Absolutely. So it comes back to this whole McMaster inquiry-based learning that I was talking about in the Bachelor of Health Sciences program. And how do you find a problem? Or when you find a problem, how are you going to understand how to solve it? And, you've experienced that problem. Every physician has, in terms of the frustration and sometimes anger and resentment you'd have towards your EHR because it was
Lots
so
of that. Yeah.
right. It was so ugly. It's so poorly organized. It takes you 10 clicks to do everything. It eats up all of your time. Nothing is where you want it to be, and it costs a fortune. And so my co-founders, Sam Garvey and Richard Vandegreen, who are also both physicians, and have backgrounds in health informatics as well, we said, we have to be able to do this better. Like, if this is the baseline that's so terrible, like, we can definitely do something better. So we started in about 2018 with a prototype that was basic, and 2019 was more of an MVP that we launched in a few clinics. And in 2020, we had a large launch and have been pushing it out quite aggressively. So we have customers in 3 different provinces in Canada now: Alberta, BC, and Ontario, and it's growing quite rapidly. And the whole point is making something that is simple to look at and find information. It's intuitive, so it doesn't take you 2 days of training and all of that time away from your friends, your family, or your job to just
Yeah.
learn how to use a platform. It's very cost effective and easy. It's not a big upsell. So we're in around the $300 a month range for the whole package. So you're not getting upsold. They're not selling $5,000 or $10,000 worth of training. Your MOA can get on and learn how to use it, oftentimes in only 1 or 2 hours. Our team is a bunch of nice, passionate people, right, that can get the job done. So we've got the product, which is outstanding. And we've had people that we've offered training to after doing a demo, and they've refused it. They're like, I don't need training. Like, this is so simple and easy to use that I'm just going to start using it right now. And if that's not the best compliment for a piece of healthcare technology you could have, I
Absolutely.
don't know what is. So it's been a great journey so far. And I think when you have those 3 things together, right, the product has to be there, because otherwise you're just selling an idea of something. But if the product is there and you've got the people that back it up that are both competent and driven while having the passion to kind of drive the system forward or drive the business forward, I think you're in a good shape. And so, or you're in good shape. And I'm really excited about the direction that we're moving right now.
And Rich, which environment or environments is it designed to function in? Is it a clinic based, office based thing? Is it a hospital thing? Does it cover all those bases? Just tell us more.
So we have 2 separate products. The one we focus on most right now is the outpatient clinic-based EHR. It's appropriate for both specialist physicians as well as family practitioners. We're also moving it out to be more applicable to the allied health space as well, so PTs and OTs and naturopaths and all of that. And then we have another product that's run in hospitals. We've implemented it in about 4 hospitals, which is a handover solution to keep track of your patient lists and tasks and automatically generate your notes based on your handover list. So that's been fairly successful. But as you're aware, dealing with hospital bureaucracy can be more challenging. And as a
Yeah.
young company, we need to focus more on the outpatient space. But we'll definitely be looking to get more active as time goes on and our team grows to offer kind of productivity layers that you can build over top of your inpatient solutions as well.
Sounds like you got the right idea. I try very hard not to get into personal stories with my guests, but I'm going to give you this one. I keep it as short as I can. In the beginning days of the EHR acquisition, I was involved with my hospital in looking for what was going to be our product. I won't say what company was making the one that we picked, but we saw it demonstrated at a major U.S. Medical university. And I was actually able to sit down at the computer, and being a surgeon, I wanted to see if I could write pre-op orders for a person who's having a cholecystectomy. And I, having never seen this thing before, I was able to do exactly that. It was just nothing to it. And that system had actually been designed by a physician at that particular medical university. Well, about a year and a half went by before we were actually able to make the purchase. And when it came to my hospital, the order entry system had been changed to the point that I was frankly never able to use it. And you know, I'm not a troglodyte. I'm a guy who was really interested in information technology, and I couldn't make it work. And it sounds like you guys have actually given some serious thought to what it's like for a doctor to sit down at this medical record and be able to use it fairly effortlessly. And it sounds like it's working.
Absolutely. That's such a great story. And it's funny when you start digging deep and into these larger kind of systems too, right? So another funny anecdote is we just implemented in the hospital system across town, one of the bigger systems, and I don't know how much money they spent, between 100 and 200 million dollars doing it. And
Right.
you spent all the time with the consultants customizing things and coming up with your order entry and all of that stuff. And now the other hospital system in town is deciding to do the same thing, right? Instead of just copying and pasting, what's been done across town, they're reinventing everything, right? So instead of, project, whatever name it is, they call it another project so that all of the consultants and industry around the implementation can eat too. And the physicians work at both hospitals. So you're like, but the physicians are exactly the same. Like,
Right.
obviously there's not perfect overlap, but if the physician can work at this hospital, can work at that hospital, then why aren't they just using exactly the same system?
Yeah, I
And
understand. And the big problem that we face in this country, quite frankly, is that the makers of these EHR products have turned the medical record into a cash register, and they're not really giving any thought to the problems that the physician needs to solve. So that's really exciting. I know you got to be proud of that, and
yeah,
I'm
the
sure
other,
you're
the other
gonna.
thing I was going to say is, so we put a lot of thought into it for sure. Like back to what you were saying, and we understand a lot about physician workflows, right? So we're not an
Hmm.
engineer who designs something in their closet and after 6 months out, comes and they're guessing about everything, and then they come to a physician and they're like, "Hey, does this work?" So it's not that set up, right? We've
Yeah.
we've been able to, I think, do things very efficiently because of our backgrounds and the fact that we all get to use it day to day, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But the best part about it is being able to iterate, right? Like if you write a paper or you came up with a design for solving a problem, usually the third or fourth or fifth or 10th iteration of a product is much better. And that's
Yep.
the most exciting thing, is that we actually have a process and a team set up where, if we get something wrong or it's not perfect right off the bat, well, we can fix it. And that process of continuously improving things and wanting to innovate while having the team to do it is a super exciting place to be. Because that's like the holy grail, right? That's the challenge in
Yeah.
innovation, is how do you get in that sustaining pattern of practice or improvement. And I think now at the place where we are with the company, we're excited to be there.
If you're able to put together an electronic healthcare record where the end user says, "I don't need your help, I can take it from here," you have really accomplished something big. And I don't know how to say congratulations loud enough for that. So this has been really an enjoyable conversation, and I really appreciate you spending the time with me and with my audience. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, and we're at the point now where I want to give you an opportunity to give us some of your own personal wisdom, where we get the name of our program. So I'm going to close my mic and listen quietly, and Dr. Richard Sztramko from Hamilton, Ontario, is going to give us his personal prescriptions for success.
Well, that's great. Thanks so much, Randy. It's been a pleasure being a guest. I think the first prescription for success that I would say is, be true to yourself. And in order to do that, you really need to know and understand who you are. So spending time reflecting on who you are as a person and what your core values are and your goals are and what you want to accomplish is. Because I think if you know who you are, then you can be true to that vision moving forward. And it's kind of hard when you don't know yourself. Like if you want to be a hard driven person, you want to work 90 hours a week, and that works for your personality and that's consistent with your core beliefs and goals, then that's great. But there's a lot of people who will put themselves in that work environment, or even if it's in entrepreneurship, and they really would be, it would be better for them to have more time off and to work less hard and work less and make less money and have more time to spend with their family. But knowing who yourself gets you to the point where you can decide which of those people you're going to try and be and how you're going to spend time and allocate your time. And I think that gets to kind of number two, which is setting limits for yourself, especially as a physician, because I think in training, explicit that you're supposed to go past those limits. If you work, 30 hours in a row and you're working 110 hours a week and you're studying all of the time, you don't really know how to set limits because it's impossible to do that. Whereas on the other side, to have space to think and reflect and rejuvenate, you really need to be able to set hard limits around, how many hours you're going to work and what you're going to allocate your time to, and then not taking on too many projects, because if you take on too many projects, you can also be bad at all of them and not be very satisfied. And then I think the third thing I would say is, lead with kindness. Like I value people who are kind and people that have integrity, and people that are good listeners. But I also think it's important to maintain the cognitive flexibility to very quickly be firm and strong and outspoken so that you can deal with people that are trying to take advantage of you or people that are members of your team. And you can, again, set those hard and fast limits, because people will treat you much differently if you show strength, and you can show that strength in a very firm and fast fashion. So I think, the kindness and the strength can run in parallel with one another, but it's really the wisdom in deciding which of those to deploy can really determine how successful you will be, especially in the business world.
Well, Rich, thank you very much for sharing that with us. You have clearly acquired a good bit of wisdom during your journey to success, and it's been a pleasure having you here to share with us. Before we go, I want to give you an opportunity to let our audience know where they can find you on whatever platform you like, email addresses or Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever. Please give us that information.
Absolutely. So there's a form that everybody can submit, contact form, at www.aryaehr.com. So aryaehr.com. There's also our email address, which is info at aryaehr.com. And then definitely follow the Arya Health LinkedIn page. That would be great to see you all there. And then, I think that's about it. Also, I'd just like to, give a shout out to the U.S. audience, and we'll be looking to get into the U.S. market in the next 12 months. So if there are people that are very frustrated with the system that they're currently using, we are set up from a technological point of view to go full bore with HIPAA compliance. And we have a lot of the other stuff in place. So we're ready to get into the U.S. market. So if there are people that are interested out there, jump onto our website, submit a contact, and we can definitely work through the process of getting you up and running.
Rich, you almost make me wish that I wasn't retired. Back when we first began to talk about an electronic healthcare record, I was so excited. I really thought it was going to make our lives better, and it has turned out to be a tremendous burden to
Randy,
physicians
why don't
in the
you
U.S.
could be our first U.S. consultant,
You've got my email address, so you know where to find me. Rich, thank you so much for being here. It's really been a pleasure, and I know our audience is going to enjoy hearing from you. Thanks again.
Thank you.
As always, thank you so much for listening today. Thanks also to Ryan Jones, who composes and performs our music for us. We hope you'll follow us on your favorite podcast platform, and we depend on your feedback to help us get better. So please leave us a review and hopefully a 5-star rating. Also, please visit our website at rxforsuccesspodcast.com, where you can offer your very own prescription for success on SpeakPipe. And as always, be sure to fill your prescription for success with my next episode.